Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me once again today. Welcome back to Dominion's 5 Basic Nation Analysis, and today we are taking a look at the Late Age nation of Gath. This is the final nation in the Hinnom line. After Hinnom and after Ashdod, you have Gath, where the humans have moved in, have taken over most of the land, but are still ruled by the tribe of giants, the Gittites, descended from the Anakim of Ashdod. So, in terms of plot, Hinnom fought a war with Abyssinia and lost, and got wiped out. And then Ashdod fought a war, I believe also fought another war with Abyssinia and got wiped out again. That said, they weren't, it wasn't nearly so bad. And so they kind of got pushed back until Gath is the only city of the Gittites, the Anakites, left. And they have conquered. They've ruled the wasteland around them, although this is actually a fertile plain here. We'll ignore that. They rule the area around them and dominate the human tribes of the region, who are no longer slaves exactly, but are still, subjects, serfs or thralls or, whatever you want to call them. They're not in charge. The giants are in charge. So in the Late Age, if you recall, Ashdod, unlike Hinnom, did not have any blood magic, and that very much reverses for Gath. As you can see, Gath has access to Kohens, who are blood mages who also have a random of the traditional Avite paths, or the traditional Rephite paths, rather. Fire, Astral, or Earth. I don't have an Earth random here right at the moment. So Gath is actually a pretty decent blood nation. Kohens cost 130 gold and are sacred, so their upkeep is not high, which are the qualities that you want in a, you want cheapness and low upkeep in a blood hunter. They're blood 1, and then they can random another path, including the blood astral cross path, the blood earth cross path, even blood fire cross path is honestly pretty good. So Kohens are very, very solid. Excellent blood hunters, good battle mages in communions, fantastic. In the capital, your other capital only commanders, you have the Kohen Gadols, who are essentially, they're similar to the Baals that Hinnom had, albeit a little bit less powerful. But honestly, probably, I want to say, better? They only have blood 2 instead of blood 3, but they still have the 2 linked randoms, plus a chance at another one. So they can be blood 2 astral 2, they can be blood 2 earth 2, those are both fantastic. Blood 2 fire 2, also good. Basically what this means is, they can start casting demon summoning spells right off the bat, as soon as they come out. They can also cast the horror summoning spells. If you happen to hit the random 3% of them have astral, and the if you happen to get the earth astral cross path on them, which is not very common but is possible, you can use the others to forge boosters to ramp them up so that they can forge crystal items for you very easily and boost your astral magic up that way, so you can end up potentially with astral 5 Kohen Gadols, although more likely astral 4. And that's not too unlikely to happen during the course of a game. You also have a variety of interesting human commanders, as well as a couple of other little researchers here. The Yadonai are kind of what the Zamzamites have degraded into. They're still pretty decent mages. 130 for 3 paths, with the potential for Death 2, Earth 2, or an Astral, so that you can get them into communions, once again. So you can do your Earth magic in communions, or you can do Death magic in communions. The Yadonais are how you get your Death magic into your communions. Abbas are healers, some of the very rare true healers in the game. They're also heretics, which can be less useful than you would think, but they also get one of these randoms and nature, so you can use them to put nature into communions. Although if you want to put nature into communions, you actually have a better option, which is the Issacharite Sibyl. Very, very cheap. Astral 1, Nature 1. The Issacharite Sibyl is essentially an independent lizard shaman, but not sacred, cheaper, and has Fortune Teller 10. They're fantastic. They're great mages. On top of that, you have one very interesting and unique commander, the Issacharite Sage. Or, well, not unique. Man has similar commanders. But the Issacharite Sage is an incredibly cheap commander who only costs 1 commander point and has 6 research points and no magic, or only a 10% chance of having magic. But, so that's a low research ability, but it's not affected by magic or drain scales because they don't have any magic paths. And they're so cheap that what you can do is you can pump out 3 of these guys in your capital, which is a citadel because it's Late Age, and you can be producing 18 research points per turn out of your capital, which is pretty nice. They are sacred, so they do take up holy points. But, still, that can mean that you can ramp up your research very, very quickly, and, just as importantly, it means you can take Drain 3 without destroying your research. And that means you free up a lot of points that other nations really don't want to use, so that you can create a better god, which is very valuable. Now, so in terms of commanders, the Issacharite sages are fantastic, and honestly, all of your mages are good. Gath has a pretty solid mage lineup. They've got a random, just Holy One priest who isn't very impressive, but can, like, lead expansion parties if you want to. Or I prefer to use the Kohens, because the Kohens have some magic and they're tougher. But you can use these guys to lead sacred expansion parties. We'll talk about Gath's sacred strategy in a moment. You have a Gittite commander, who is a standard giant commander. You have a Benjaminite commander, who is a human commander, dual swords and a pillager bonus, which isn't very relevant, and only 40 leadership, but very cheap. You have, as we talked about, the Sibyls. The Sibyls are fantastic mages for the price. Easily competitive with, for example, middle-aged Qin Shi's Imperial Geomancers in terms of value for money. You have the Abbas. The Abbas are also sweet mages, a little bit more expensive, but they're stealthy. They're healers, and they have 3 paths plus the potential to get you, and Nature 2. I mean, Nature 2 is a really solid path to have. You have Yadonais, so Earth, Death, cross paths, good randoms. And then, of course, you have the Kohens, who are going to be your main communion mages and bloodhunters. You're going to be recruiting tons of these guys. And the Kohen Gadols, who you're going to start pumping out of your capital once you have the breathing room to do so, once you've got a couple of other forts established. And then probably, like, not stop. Because these guys are going to be your main demon summoners. Although the standard Kohens also have a lot of demon summoning to do for this nation. We'll talk about that in a second. In terms of units, now the picture sort of turns around a little bit because most of Gath's units are not terribly special, especially not for the late age. Reubenite archers are cheap, like early age shortbow archers, not impressive in the late age. Benjaminite slingers are interesting in that they have double attacks, so they're a little bit, in that way, they're a little bit like Ulm's Steel Maidens. The difference is they have lower protection than Ulm's Steel Maidens, and they're in the late age, where independents are a lot tougher and generally competition is a lot tougher. So they die like flies compared to the Steel Maidens, who in early age are quite tough troops and very, very solid. A little bit more expensive, but Benjaminite slingers, not fantastic. You can use them to mass up slingshots that can defend themselves in melee and cast flaming arrows on them. That can be handy. So they're a good mass-up. They're a decent massable troop. Naphtali Spearmen, basic, effectively independent light infantry. Zebulonite soldiers, these guys are okay. They require a pretty heavy recruitment point investment, but they have low protection, but okay defense skill, and they have formation fighter, so they're not terrible. And they're fairly cheap for late-age troops. Zebulonite hornblowers are notable because they give you a morale bonus, so you should have a couple in every unit. Gadite swordsmen are heavy sword infantry with a javelin, so that's nice, but I would say not worth it. 28 resources, 14 recruitment points for 1 broadsword attack and a javelin. Not fantastic. Asherite soldiers, more expensive still, but they have defense skill 14 and prot 17, so they're very tough. They're very tanky. These guys can definitely compete in the late age, however they're expensive in terms of resources and recruitment points, so I wouldn't recruit a whole lot of them. These 3 units are the 3 units that I think Gath should be using, and here's why. Levite Zealots are a sacred unit. They have a patrol bonus, which, because, as I mentioned, you're a blood nation, is really, really valuable. And you might say, well, how can I use sacreds for patrolling? Well, the secret is, Levite Zealots can be recruited in any fort. Anywhere you have a fort and a temple, you can recruit Levite Zealots. So you can spam these guys. They don't cost much more than standard infantry. Stat-wise, they're not impressive at all, but they have this patrol bonus, so they count as 3 people for the purposes of patrolling. That makes them very, very efficient at patrolling when you're blood hunting, and so you can hold down your blood hunting provinces a lot more easily than you might think, with fewer patrollers than you might think. 40 Levite Zealots patrolling a province, which you can mass up pretty quickly, can hold it down with like 10 levels of blood hunters in that province, so you can burn down provinces for blood slaves very, very quickly, and keep the unrest at a manageable level with your Levite Zealots. On top of that, because they can be recruited in any fort if you need to, you can throw them into combat with your bless. Although, I wouldn't say you should design a bless for them. You should design a bless for your other sacred unit. The Gittite soldiers, pretty solid. They're kind of comparable to the light colossi infantry that Phasia gets. They have the javelin, which has high piercing damage. They have a spear that has high piercing damage. Their overall stats are not fantastic, but they're also not expensive as giants go. In particular, low recruitment point cost. Lower than most of your human infantry even. So Gittite soldiers you can actually use as your front line for most of the game. In particular, you have a huge variety of buffs you can apply to these guys. It's very easy to drop wooden warriors on them from your Abbas. It's very easy to cast earth buffs. It's very easy to cast Rush of Strength to push their strength up to 19 once you've researched that. They can get a lot of buffs that make them very dangerous. And so you can keep using them for a long time. I mean, hell, you can just drop Strength of Giants on them pretty easily because you get earth random blood mages, so you can form Sabbaths and communions with your Issacharite Sibyls very easily. And so you can drop strength buffs and armor legions of steel you can drop on them, all kinds of buffs. Gath is a great buff nation. Finally, you have the Gibbors. And the Gibbors are basically cut price discount Anakites. They cost about 2/3 of what Anakites cost, and they have about half the utility. So they're less effective as sacreds than Anakites were. But Anakites were extremely overpowered. Like, Anakites were competitive for the best sacreds in the game, even considering their high price. Anakites were utterly nation-defining just having them. The fact that Gibbors aren't that good doesn't mean they are not a solid sacred. And the reason they're a solid sacred is because they have pretty high stats across the board, generally speaking, and they have 38 hit points. So what that means is Regeneration Bless works really well on them, Fortitude works really well on them, Blood Bond works really well on them. Quickness doesn't work well on them because they don't have 2 attacks, they only have 1. And they are size 4, so their attack density is always going to be low, but that matters a lot less if you can just make them survive anything the enemy throws at you, which you can, at least for expansion purposes. And they stay tough the whole game, but magic starts to kill them after a while, of course, and so you sort of transition away from them and towards masses of troops backed up by, well, masses of summons, actually, is what you transition towards. So you can see here my recruitment, it is turn 12. My expansion has gone quite well. Very well, in fact. I'm up to, how many provinces am I actually at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 provinces in 12 turns, not bad. I'll certainly take that, especially in the late age where expansion is often rough because of the tough independence. Over here, I've got a little army, which is entirely made up of Gibbors. Everyone else in this army has died. And let's look at Oak Halls, and I'll show you what bless I took and why. So this is my prophet leading a gang of Gibbors. You can see the Gibbors actually have quite a bit of experience, so their defense skill is really high. This adds to their tankiness. And then, on top of that, we drop the Divine Blessing. My bless is Regeneration and Blood Bond. This is, once again, in keeping with the general theme of Gibbors, this is a cut rate version of an Ashdod Bless. The classic Ashdod Bless here is to take a golden calf, or one of the two kind of Ashdod memes that I've talked about before. Take a golden calf, and you take Regeneration, Blood Bond, and Fortitude. So you're taking half damage, first of all, from the Fortitude. It's then halved again by the Blood Bond, because what Blood Bond does is it spreads the damage that you take out to nearby sacred units, and then you regenerate it away. Anakites regenerate 7 hit points per turn. With the Blood Bond, half of your damage is spread out backwards through the unit, so if this guy gets hit, his damage is spread out to all these guys, and then they all regenerate. So effectively, what that's doing is it's putting the whole health pool of all your sacreds to work, and maximizing the use that you get out of your regeneration. Plus, the Fortitude means that you only take half the damage in the first place. It's a very potent combination. It makes Anakites extremely difficult to kill. These Gibbors are easier to kill than that, because they only regenerate 4 hit points and they don't have the Fortitude, so they do take full damage from hits past their protection and defense skill. But it does still mean that they're super, super hard to kill, or even hurt in any meaningful way. You can see some of my units in the back are regenerating now, and just the fact that all of my units are taking some of the damage, spreading it out, and then regenerating it, means that the effective DPS of the... Okay, basically what it means is, instead of the enemy DPS going against the hit pool of 1 Gibbor or 4 Gibbors in the front line, it means it's matching up against the entire health pool of all of them, or most of them. So instead of, 120 hit points in the front line, or whatever it is, it's matching up against 300 or 400, and every chunk of that is regenerating. So effectively, what I've got here is 1 Uber Gibbor who regenerates like 50 hit points a turn. That's very, very hard to kill. On top of that, there's a very efficient way to take this bless for Gath, because Gath has access to the Black Bull chassis. The Great Black Bull is nature and blood. They are a blood nation, so having blood is great. Having the nature blood cross path allows me to forge the armor of Twisting Thorns eventually, and it makes it relatively cheap to take the regeneration and blood bond bless. The Great Black Bull with regeneration is a berserking trampler and a fantastic expander. This guy can expand alone, so this helps hypercharge your expansion, or charge up your expansion rather. It's still not hyper, but this is an excellent way to get good expansion with something like this, an Awake Expander, while at the same time making your Gibbors or Gibbors very, very useful. Whereas without a bless like that, they're kind of mediocre just because they only have 1 attack. Now, this is an expensive bless, and you may notice my scales are actually really good. I've got growth 3, I've got productivity 3. That's what I need, because my units, Gath's units, are fairly resource intensive. Gibbors are 39 resources, Levite Zealots are more resources than they are gold, 17 resources, Asherites are 27, even Zebulonites are 15 resources, and they're not very good. I mean, they're okay, but they're not great. So you want a lot of resources as Gath, so you can churn out Gittites and Asherites and Gibbors and Levites. Taking productivity 3 means that you can afford to do that. Taking growth 3 is pretty much vital because you're a blood nation. But you can afford to take drain 3 because you have access to the Issacharite sages, which helps pay for that heavy bless you've got. You can afford to take misfortune 3 because if misfortune starts hitting you, you can start pumping out Issacharite Sibyls. Now, Issacharite Sibyls are affected by your drain dominion, so you don't want to recruit 1,000,000 of them, but you can afford to recruit, several of them in each fort in order to reduce the chance that any real bad misfortune events will affect your forts. Right here, as you can see, I started off the game by recruiting 3 Issacharite sages per turn, and I did that for about 4 or 5 turns, and then I switched to recruiting 1 sage and 1 Kohen per turn. So I'm also building up a stable of bloodhunters, which I will start to deploy very soon. In terms of research, my research is competitive. This is perfectly fine research for this stage of the game. I've hit construction level 3, I'm going to hit construction level 4 in about 2 more turns, and then I'll go down blood magic. And I'm going straight down blood because this is the other part of the puzzle when it comes to blesses, and this is another reason why I would say, as Gath, you should take a pretty heavy bless, even though your sacreds are not amazing at first blush. You have access to 2 national summons. Scapegoats, which summons Seir, and summon Shedim, which summons, Shedim. These units are shared with Hinnom and Ashdod, although Ashdod cannot natively summon them because they don't have any blood magic. Shedim are kind of hard to summon. They require level 3 blood and level 1 air. That's difficult for you to get. But Scapegoats you can summon really easily because unlike any other nation in the line, you have relatively cheap, non-unrest causing blood 1 bloodhunters. Scapegoats costs 8 blood slaves, summons 2 Seir, and they're super worth it. Let's pop out into the mod inspector, and I'll show you what they do. Alright, so here we are in the mod inspector. This is what a Seir is. And the first thing you may notice is that this guy has 28 hit points and 3 attacks. Strength 16, so 2 claws and then a gore attack. The gore attack for some reason won't hover over. Also, it's a berserker +4. So, Seir are basically blenders. They're a lot like Ozelotls, who also have multiple attacks. They're also multiple attack blood summons. There's 2 different spells that summon them. Summon Seirim is more effective. Hinnom and Ashdod summon them this way. They summon them 5 at a time for a slightly higher price per Seir. It works out to about 1 2/3 or 4 2/3 blood slaves each, and it requires blood 2 in order to do it. Scapegoats is the blood 1 version. But because your cheap bloodhunter mages can summon Seir, you can summon them en masse very quickly, and they are sacred. So when you have a sacred 3 attack berserker with relatively high hit points in size 3, that Blood Bond regeneration bless that you took works really, really well for Seirim. And here's another important quality. I know the screen just turned black. That's because I shifted back to the game. There we go. I'm sorry, OBS is just a little bit hard to deal with sometimes. You may notice Kohen Gadol's are priest level 3 recruitable, so you can have Divine Blessing at your fingertips at all times. Once, especially later in the game, once you start to mass up Seirim, Kohen Gadol's can cast Divine Blessing very, very easily. So, with that, what you have is your early game plan and your mid game plan all sorted. Very, very simply. Early game, you expand primarily with Gibbors, blessed with Blood Bond and Regeneration, and you expand with your Awake Expander. Like I said, the Great Black Bull gives you this very, very easily. Mid game, as you progress, it's late age, so pretty much all of your provinces are blood huntable. Anywhere you don't have a fort, you start slamming out, a Kohen and Kohens and Issacharite sages. And you can easily transition without even hardly touching much of the rest of your magic. You can have pretty solid research. You can push down to Blood 3 or Blood 4. Blood 3 is enough. And start slamming out Seirs from everywhere. Anywhere you have a wasteland, it has to be cast in wastelands. So one key part of your strategy is ensuring that you have a wasteland nearby, which as it happens, I actually don't in this game. And if you don't have a wasteland nearby, then obviously your strategy has to change because you literally can't cast the spell. Yeah, boy, wow. I have 0 wastelands. Okay. So, here's the funny thing about Gath. That's still not crippling. Like, that's a really good spell. Slamming out a ton of Seirim and rushing somebody with them is a super, super good way to do things. There's a wasteland, but it's way the hell out there. Okay, so I could push over this way, steal that wasteland, and then start pushing out tons and tons of Seirim there. I wonder why Agartha is in the middle of a swamp on this random map. Anyway, but if you don't have a wasteland nearby, you can look around and go, okay, I don't have wastelands, so instead I'm going to shift over to a different strategy. I'm going to start pumping out Issacharite Sibyls, in addition to my sages, and Abbas, and we're going to have nature-focused sacred combat, and we're going to use nature to buff our troops. You can also start pumping out Yadonais. That gives you Death 2, it gives you Earth 2, and it gives you Death and Earth in your communions. And in the meantime, you can still be blood hunting, because of course blood is still a really good school. Even if you can't summon your Seirs, you can bind devils super easily. You can bind demon knights. Demon knights are extremely good troops. In fact, it's weird that Seir cost half of what demon knights do because they have 3 attacks, but demon knights are very tough. They cause fear. They have multiple attacks themselves. They're really, really good. So once you get up to blood level 5, you can start crapping out tons and tons and tons and tons of demon knights because you can take Kohen Gadol's. A third of Kohen Gadol's can just summon them, and you can forge boosters to allow your Earth random Kohens to summon them as well. So you have a lot of demon knight production. You have a lot of summon production in general. Devils, demon knights, you can cast the spell that sends horror. You can cast call lesser horror in battle. Or send lesser horror. You can also cast that pretty easily because your Astral 2 randoms can forge Starshine Skullcaps, which boost astral magic. So you can send lesser horrors to attack people. You can summon Ill Earth Elementals if you want. Late game, as you ratchet up blood, you get up to Call Horror, you get up to Ritual of 5 Gates really easily, so once again, tons and tons of demons. You can summon Father Ill Earth pretty easily, because you can forge Bloodstones with your blood randoms, with your Earth randoms, I'm sorry. So you can forge Earth Boots, Bloodstone, bam, and then you have a Earth Boot, Bloodstone, and Bloodthorn, and you're up to cast Summoning Father Illard, so you can get Podosion very easily once you get up here high in blood. So blood as Gath is your major school. It's what you're really good at. You're pretty good at a lot of other things. Still, I mean, your mages are just really pretty good as Gath. Abbas are good mages, and you can do very, very powerful nature battlefield magic with them. You weave them into a communion. Let's go into Alteration, and you can see you can swarm with them, definitely. You can cast Wooden Warriors very easily. You can cast Creeping Doom and Mass Protection very easily. Down here, you can drop... I don't think you can drop... You can't drop Foul Vapors because you don't have any water randoms. If you empowered in water, you probably could. But you can Poison Ward yourself. You can cast Relief and Serpent's Blessing. You can't really compete for the high-level nature rituals because you don't have native high-level nature mages, unless, of course... you just so happened to take Nature 7 on your god, in which case you can also compete for Mother Oak, because you have recruitable Nature 2 who can go around site searching for nature, so if you want to push that way, you can. You're not locked into the blood path because your non-blood mages are still really solid. And that's the interesting thing about Gath. Gath is a blood nation that doesn't actually have to focus on blood if they don't want to. It's generally a good idea. But in a situation like this, obviously I was just kind of playing this game really quickly to get the expansion through, and not really looking. But if I started on a game like this and I clicked around to all my provinces and went, huh, I don't have any wastelands closer than across the whole map, then I would say, well, okay, then I'm going to focus on nature. I'm going to focus on earth and death. I'm going to do, like, the standard research first, get a solid mid-game plan that way, use my Gib Wars, because they're still pretty solid. And then, as I transition into the mid-game, I'll start blood hunting, and I'll build up a blood economy, which I'll be able to do quickly, because I've been using Kohens the whole time, since they can enter Sabbats, and I've done a little bit of blood hunting as I went along, just to have a few blood slays for things. And then I'll shift into the demon production economy, and send everything into warp drive. But first, I'm going to, go around, recruit a bunch of Abbas for the randoms and the nature magic. Gonna try to maybe get Mother Oak, depending on who else is in the game. There's a lot of flexibility here in Gath. I have not played Gath much, and part of that is because Gath is very firmly a communion nation, and I'm not a huge communion nation player. I've been playing, obviously, middle-aged Tianqi, and they've sort of solidified the impression that I'm not really a communion nation player, but on the other hand, Gath is also a giant nation. And giant nations mean, well, you can use them as super combatants if you want, or thugs. You can thug pretty easily. Kohens can be startlingly good thugs, because if they random Earth or Astral, they have great defensive options. So, if you give them gear, you can thug with Kohens. Lightly. They're not, like, the best thugs, but especially if they random Earth, they can Iron Skin Temper Flesh themselves, and then with a little bit of basic gear, they can still take provinces. They have high map move. You have access to a lot of nature magic, so Abbas can thug, funnily enough, because they can give themselves personal regeneration, especially, once again, if they random Earth. A Nature 2 Earth 1 Giant is a fantastic thug, just kind of off the bat, because they can go Iron Skin, Temper Flesh, personal regeneration, here we go. Now I'm at Prot 30, because I'm wearing some kind of armor, and taking half damage and regenerating through that, and I have a lot of nature gems available because I have a lot of nature site searching, so I probably have a ring of regeneration, so I'm regenerating 5 hit points a turn, and you can't really stop me. Oh, and if I take any afflictions, I'll heal them. So you can thug with Abbas. A lot of people wouldn't, but still, they're not expensive for thugs. If you really wanted to, you could even thug with Gittite Commanders or Serens. I wouldn't probably do it with Serens. They're a little expensive for that, and they tend not to have magic. Like, only 1 in 5 has magic, which means only 1 in 15 will actually have Earth, which is the thug path out of those 3. But their stats are really good. So if you give a Seren, like, a Vine Shield and a Frostbrand, or actually even just a Vine Shield, he can take lightly defended provinces. If you give him a Vine Shield and a Ring of Regeneration, he's quite solid, because he's regenerating 5 hit points a round. He's capital only is the problem, and you don't really want to be spending your capital only turns recruiting things that aren't early game mages or mid and late game Kohen Gadols. You want to be pumping these suckers out. You can thug with them, but they're a slow to recruit capital only that costs 360 gold, and they're not ideal for it, so I probably wouldn't. Like, if it's an Adon from Ashdod, yes, I thug with them, because they're super combatants. Kohen Gadol's, not so much. They're not designed for that. So there's a lot of... I mean, this is the thing that impresses me about Gath, is the flexibility. Gath has a lot of magical power, a lot of magical flexibility. They can do a ton of different things. And if you take a high bless on your sacreds, they can expand very effectively. You can see 12 turns, 20 provinces. That's on the high end of average. That's higher than average. It's definitely notable. It's not super fast, and I could have done it faster if I was really focused on doing it faster. I spent a couple turns kind of experimenting with different things. I accidentally sent my god the wrong way, got him stuck, had to backtrack for 2 turns. So this is not the fastest I could have done it. If I'd been really focused on just churning out sacred expansion parties and my god and sending them out go, 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 probably could have hit 24. I want to say that I could have hit 24, maybe 25 if I was a little bit lucky. But it's not hard with Gath to get good expansion if you take a heavy bless. Now, obviously there are other strategies. For example, if you want better scales, like if you wanted Luck 3 and Order 3, that's perfectly viable. You can do that. It means that you have less of a bless, so you can lean less heavily on your Gibbors in the early game expansion. That said, you can tailor a bless for your sacred summons a little bit better if you do that. It also means you don't have the Awake Expander. But let's take a look at a few options. You don't have other national spells, by the way. You have summon Mazakim, so you can summon the flying little imps with nature, and you can summon Lilots, which are seducers. Lilots are never worth summoning, they're just bad. Mazakim are actually pretty good, so you can spam these guys out. And they can actually do a lot of damage. They're flying, they have 2 attacks, they're not strong, but they are demonic, and they're affected by spells that affect demons. So they're quite solid. I'm totally losing my words for a second here. Oh dear. I've totally spaced out on a name. Althea, that's it. The Hinnom player who won once more Into the Breach used Mazakim very heavily. Because, of course, all the nations of the line have that spell. Actually, I think Ashdod doesn't. I think it's only Hinnom and Gath can summon Mazakim. I think Ashdod cannot. And Ashdod doesn't have any native nature magic anyway. But Mazakim are pretty solid, especially because they're cheap. So if you're going if you're leaning on your nature mages, Issacharite Sibyls can spam Mazakim with your nature gems, and that can be very effective. You can see in this game, once again, I've been expanding very rapidly. I haven't been researching. I have not been focused on site searching. Probably what you should do is fairly early on, as the expansion commences, you know, when you're still in the stage of recruiting, like a whole bunch of Gibbors every turn. Just take a turn, pop out an Issacharite Sibyl or 2, have them go around site searching, maybe even an Abba or 2, have them go around site searching. Just to start picking up nature gems. It's very easy for you to get a lot of nature gems early on. And a Yadonai. Yadonai will give you great site searching potential, and they'll be very effective combat magic later on. So you could do something like this. Come here, you. Something like that. Later on, you can recruit a Zebulonite Hornblower to keep these guys' morale up, because he gives +1 morale to the whole squad. And, yeah, with that site searching potential, you can just be wandering around site searching early on, and starting to build up your gem collection while your sacreds are out crushing face and expanding in all directions. So let's look at some other god builds, because there are a number of other options. This is a Golden Idol build. Now, he's imprisoned because all of his blesses are minor. This bless is nothing like as good for expanding, because it's not tough. It doesn't let your guys stand there and weather the damage nearly so well. It's a lot more fragile. You have better scales, so you can expand better with your troops. Your troops aren't fantastic. You could easily cut Dominion down, but basically what this is designed for is this bless will let you crap out tons and tons and tons of Levite Zealots with a bless that makes them do a lot of damage. So if they get into combat with somebody, they have the strength of the earth, so they hit really hard. They have blood surge, so as soon as they kill somebody, their attack and strength spike. And they have withering weapons, so people that they hit will end up withering away to death. So that makes Levite Zealots dangerous and something that your opponent has to respect. At a very cheap price, it also lets your golden idol start summoning vampires as soon as it wakes up, as you hit blood 7. So if you take this build, focus real hard on research, he'll wake up sometime in year 3, and can start summoning vampires very, very quickly. So by turn 40 or turn 45, you could have several vampire lords out, at which point you could turn your research to other things. People aren't really going to want to rush Gath. Gath is a little bit hard to rush. I mean, some factions will. Raga, if you start next to Raga, Raga will try to rush Gath. But generally speaking, there are better targets. There are other people out there that you want to rush better. This is the god that I was just showing you, the Regeneration Bloodbond Black Bull. I'm thinking this might be the most efficient option for Gath, just because it gives you that fantastic durability on your sacreds, and when you can summon demon sacreds like that, that's a really good idea. Oh, on top of that, if we want to look at, let's hop back out of the game real quick and go to the Inspector. Hold on. So here's the Shed. I knew there was something I was forgetting to show you. Shedim are not sacred, but what they are is upgraded storm demons. So you can summon them. Like I said, it takes blood 3 and air 1, and air 1 is hard to get for you, but it's well worth it, because you can summon them for less than 8 gems each, which is, so they're slightly cheaper than a storm demon, and they come very much faster, and they're a lot better because they're lightning. For one thing, fun fact, the damage of this lightning that the Shedim throw is actually increased by their strength. It's armor negating strength damage, so it's 15 armor negating damage to start off with. But if you buff their strength, that goes up. And Gath can buff strength really easily. If nothing else, you can buff it with Rush of Strength, which is the blood strength buffing spell. Which makes it, of course, 19, because it buffs their strength by 4. Also, they have 40 hit points, so they're not ethereal like Storm Demons are. We can pull up Storm Demons for comparison. So you can see Storm Demons are ethereal, but they only have 20 hit points. So Shedim are actually more durable, at least against magic attacks. They have higher strength, so they do more damage with the lightning. And then the Thunder Fist attack is the same for both. And once again, they do more damage with it. So it's the bludgeoning damage, then it also has a 10 damage armor negating shock attack attached. So Shedim are really solid, because Bind Storm Demon, like I said, they cost basically the same. 7 blood slaves each. These guys cost like 7 3/4, something like that. And to bind Storm Demons, they only come 1 at a time, but to summon Shedim, they come 3 at a time. So a lot quicker, a lot more turn efficient, more than enough to compensate for the couple of extra blood slaves that you spend, the 2 extra blood slaves that you spend. So Shedim are good. I mean, Storm Demons are already fantastic. Shedim are better. And then Seir are one of the most effective melee berserker units in the game, especially once you drop some prop buffs on them. Like you drop Iron Warriors or Wooden Warriors on this guy. You cast Mass Regeneration or Mass Protection. You cast Relief to keep them active, and then your Seir will just mow their way through anything. Now, of course, once again, these spells can both only be cast in Wastelands. So in order to use these guys, you have to have Wastelands. If you don't have Wastelands, you'll have to fall back on merely having really good magic and really good recruitable sacreds, and access to all of the standard demon summons pretty easily, except for Storm Demons, like access to Demon Knights. Let's pull up Demon Knights for comparison. See, look at these guys. They're disgusting. They're basically late-age knights, but even with more armor and also fear. And better, actually, they're better stats across the board. If we look at knights, the indie knights, the indie knights are 2 points worse than demon knights in everything, have half the hit points, and 4 less protection, plus demon knights are unbreakable. They have no morale, and they're a lot faster. Basically, they're just horrifically powerful units. So, with all these summons at your fingertips, Gath is a very strong blood nation. And they're also a nation that doesn't actually have to rely on strong blood. They can do all kinds of things. Other job. Where did I come up with that? Other god options. Gath has access to a lot of... Well, they have access to a lot of chassis, but to be honest, a lot of them are not very efficient. Like, none of these are good titans. None of them. You could take the Demi-Lich if you wanted high death at a low cost, which is fine. Like, you could certainly do that. You could rely on using Yadonais to sight search and build up to cast very high-level death spells with a teleporting Demi-Lich or something. The Demi-Lich can carry a Rainbow Bless pretty effectively. But for the blesses you want, the Golden Idol is cheaper, or of course the Great Black Bull is the cheapest option for that Blood Bond regeneration bless we were looking at. The Bulls are also your most efficient expanders in this category, so you can either go Earth Nature or Blood Nature. I prefer Blood Nature because it's a Blood Nation, and that synergizes very well with the nation, but Earth Nature, there's certainly nothing wrong with it. You could go Fortitude Regeneration, it would be more expensive, but it would help smaller parties of Sacreds more, and you could probably expand with only 3 or 4 Gibbors if you did that. I would pretty much ignore all of these guys. The Anunnaki of Growth and Rebirth does have that Spring of Mortality thing going for them, which is kind of cool, but not really cool enough to pay the tax of, you know, an extra 70 points for that. It's like you get a much shittier expander with no natural protection in exchange for having him come back, when you could instead get a good berserking trampling expander for less. I don't know. It seems like a pretty easy choice to me. Of these, the Golden Idol is objectively the correct choice. The Divine Glyph can also work if you want a high Astral Bless, but you do have Mage Priests who could benefit from that, so you could go for a Mage Bless, but my problem with that is if you don't take some kind of a pretty heavy Bless, expansion with Gath is actually difficult. Because unblessed, or lightly blessed, Gibborim are not terribly impressive. They only have the 1 attack. They only have 14 protection. They're easily shot by crossbows. And the rest of your troops are bad at expanding. I mean, they're just bad at expanding. Gittite soldiers are probably the best, I want to say, because they have the javelin attack and then they have high strength, so they do quite a bit of damage. But the problem is just the resource cost. You can't mass these guys quickly enough to be effective in the very, very early game when you don't have your cap circle completed yet. Gibbors actually are a lot more efficient use of resources to create combat power. So early on, Gibborim or Gittite soldiers are how you want to go, but you can only recruit like 2, 3, maybe 4 of them on the first couple of turns. So I think having the Awake Expander is valuable, and if you're not going to have the Awake Expander, I think you have to go for an Immobile with a pretty hefty Bless. But there's other options. You could take an Imprisoned or Dormant Titan if you have something real specific you want them to do in the late game. Some of these are actually shared with Machaka, funnily enough. The Scorpion King is an okay expander at a fairly low cost. He has Fear, he has high protection and Earth magic, so you can make him very hard to hurt. He has multiple attacks, so Scorpion King, decent option. The dragons, of course, are staples. You can use the dragons. They're a little bit overpriced, I think, but they're very solid because they can fly, and they have those area of effect attacks. The Dragon Gas, the Dragon Frost, and the Dragon Fire. Those are all good. Ignore the Eagles. They're bad. They're not good expanders, and they're not really very good at anything else either, unfortunately. I want to love the Raven of the Underworld, but it's just not very good. If for some reason you really want to get underwater, the Earth Serpent will get you there, but kind of expensively. I would just take Earth 6 on the Earth Serpent, I guess, or I'm not sure what else you would want. I mean, it's easier for Gath because you can take Drain 3. And that just gets you some free points that other nations just don't have. So you need Growth 3 and Prod 3, but after that, that leaves you 124 points. So you could take, yeah, you can basically only afford Earth 6 on him unless you tank something else. You can tank that, but with 80 points on another path, you're like, it's hard to get a whole lot out of these guys. Honestly, I would stick with the Bulls, the Golden Calf, maybe the Scorpion King. I think those are your best choices, just because they're relatively cheap, they're efficient for what they give you. The Golden Idol is your absolute best choice for a hugely obscene bless. Like, this is what Ashdod uses to make hugely obscene blesses. You don't really want to tank scales quite as much as Ashdod does, but you can. you can do this, and it won't hurt you all that much because your giants are shockingly light on recruitment points. Your human infantry will be hard to recruit, but Gibborim and Gittite soldiers will be easy to recruit because they barely require recruitment points. And then you can pump out Levite zealots as well. So this could work. This would give you the full Ashdod Bless. This would be regeneration, fortitude, and blood bond. And this makes giants basically invincible for most of the early game, up until somebody pulls out like Soul Slay or Gifts from Heaven. Even Gifts from Heaven won't actually kill Anakites under this bless. I think it will kill Gibbors, because it's 150 damage quartered. A Gibbor might just barely be able to survive a hit, but they would still be wiped out by mass Gifts from Heaven in a way that Anakites aren't quite. So, yeah, it doesn't make them Anakites, but it makes them really, really scary. It makes them more than scary enough to justify the 70 gold cost. So, in any case, thanks for listening. Hopefully this has been helpful. I know some of you, you know who I'm talking about, have been looking for this for quite a while, and the reason why I'm doing this video now, the reason why this is coming out earlier than I thought it would, actually, is because Accidental Ascension 3 is about to start, and I am playing Gath in that game. So once again, it's a random RNG pretender, and just as a quick sneak peek, so remember everything we've talked about the real heavy bless strategy, we've talked about the fact that you have great blood, so you have a lot of flexibility in your magic, you want high prod on your god because you need resources to recruit all of your great units. So given all of that, let's look at the random pretender that I rolled. Oh God.